All right. Good evening, and welcome to the Poetry Center at San Francisco State University. My name is Brandon Brown, and I am thrilled to be tonight's MC for this conversation between John Yau and Claudia La Rocco, and readings from both of them as well. Tonight's event is the second event in the Poetry Center's In Common Writer series. And on behalf of the Poetry Center, I'd like to thank the Walter and Elise Haas Fund for their support of this series. I've been attending Poetry Center readings since the year 2000, and Thursday night's reading with John Yau and Andrew Joron was the first one I watched on a laptop in El Cerrito. It was a wonderful event, and I'm really excited about what we'll get to experience tonight. Personally, I have found John Yau's writing on art, which lately appears quite regularly at the journal he helped found, Hyperallergic, extremely motivating in recent weeks, when I, like many of us, are deeply missing the experience of seeing art on gallery walls. He's an extraordinary viewer of painting and writer about painting in particular, and I really recommend checking out his many reviews online. Here in the Bay Area, Claudia La Rocco has been a driving force for art and writing since moving here a few years ago. As a writer, editor, teacher, and friend, I've learned an enormous amount from her writing, attentions, and efforts, from her rich engagement with contemporary dance, to the exquisite new piece from Ugly Duckling Press called Quartet, a study of her long friendships with Bill Bergson, Kevin Killian, Douglas Crimp, and Sam Miller. So with that, I'll introduce Claudia. Claudia and John will both give readings, and we'll have time for questions, so please feel free to use the Q&A function or chat questions. And now I'll welcome Claudia. Claudia La Rocco's work explores hybridity and improvisation, moving between poetry, prose, and performance. She is the author of the selected writings, The Best Most Useless Dress, the pamphlet Quartet, the chapbook I Am Trying to Do the Assignment, and the novel Petit Cadeau. Please join me in virtually welcoming Claudia La Rocco.
Thanks so much, Brandon, for that lovely introduction. And thanks everyone, I guess, for being here or there. I was thinking that the anxiety now has moved away from will anyone show up to will I be able to show up technologically. But I want to thank the Poetry Center. It's really a delight to be reading with John, who's somebody who, before I moved to the Bay, I lived in New York for 16 years, and John was a deeply influential force, particularly early on in those years. And yeah, it's nice to, we were trying to figure out how long we had, when was the last time we saw each other and could not remember, which is never a good sign. But I'm going to read something in honor of my friendship with John. I thought I would start by reading something that is quite a few years old, almost a decade. It is a poem called The Better Part, and it's part of this book, The Triumph of, there's the camera, The Triumph of Poverty, which is based, as many of you I'm sure will know from that visual, on a Nicole Eisenman painting. And John had the idea through our press that it would be, one of the things we would do is create anthologies in which everyone would respond to one painting. And this was the painting of this anthology, The Better Part. You know, it's not for everybody, this continual living. The sun is a disaster. The colors are beautiful, but finally, none of the ladies can think of anything else to say. They press her with endless invitations. She tries to stay in the house, tries not to entertain carnal thoughts with regard to the gardener. There is no gardener. But the colors are really very, very beautiful. Somehow everything has been undone. The rabbit chases itself across the incessantly turning field. The trees show too much life. All this talk of living up to one's potential. There is something in this corner, something devastating unfolds. Her skin looks like shit. Everything comes from the word remember. You remember, don't you, she says, and it is not a question. Somewhere, surely, it is summertime still, and there is a moment for anything else. Discretion is the soul of valor, they told her when she signed the papers. The state deregulates everything that can't be bought and sold, she whispers back. The blue house is collapsing. We will always misunderstand each other. Is that what living in the countryside is all about? She wanted to get lost in a crowd, not this crowd, but just some sort of terminal hanging around. The boy had drowned in the backyard. They fell over themselves to tell. Lost and found, it was in all the papers. There isn't anyone at the windows. He didn't finally make a sound. They appropriated her cause for their own designs. I am devoted to you, she whispered. She signed on the dotted line. The other thing that I'm going to read or read from is this new work, Quartet, which Brandon mentioned in his lovely introduction. We'll make one small but also important correction to that introduction, which is that I didn't have long friendships with these four men, Bill Berkson, Sam Miller, Douglas Crimp, and Kevin Killian. I knew them only at the ends of their lives. I wish I'd known them for longer. The publication is so new that I don't yet have a copy, but it's part of this Ugly Duckling pamphlet series. Quartet is the name of the work. So I'm going to read the first few pages of this, and it starts with, there are quotes interspersed throughout the work from these four men. And there are also dictations, and it starts with a dictation. I don't know how well it's going to work out loud, but I'm going to try it. So first, the four quotes. It just takes time, but who has time? Sam Miller. Life gets complicated. Douglas Crimp. It's nice that people do things. Bill Berkson. It all turned out nicely, didn't it? Kevin Killian. Dictation, December 21st, 2019. In the dream, it's a ballet festival or a symposium. I have very fragmented memories, but there were lots of pieces that we saw, I think premieres, and I was at a bar or somewhere with like crow calling, one of those restaurants that isn't very satisfying where you end up between performances. Even now I might be editorializing, but I do remember very clearly that Christopher Wheeldon was Crow. I almost called him Christopher Walken, slight laughter. I was eating with Christopher and Douglas Crimp was at a nearby table, and I just remember thinking, oh, Douglas saw it, Douglas can explain it to me, or he can explain myself to me. If I am writing something, Crow, doesn't make sense that I need help with. I woke up missing him terribly. He's not somebody I was good friends with, but that sort of intimacy that develops when you go to see the same type of sand crunching over and over again, year after year. And you see the same people in the audience, and often they're not the people that you know, are closest to in the world, your partners, your best friends, your relatives. They're the people who also love this thing that you love. So it is this sort of parallel intimacy and closeness, because you also can't sometimes share these things fully with the people you are intimate with in other ways. If you're lucky, you can, or maybe not if you're lucky. Maybe you don't want to. Maybe it's delicious to have this other world and place. And anyway, yeah, Douglas and Bill and Sam. Well, Douglas and Sam were that. Bill and Kevin were something else. Wind. Don't know, is there any frame for these four men, except that they all died in the span of 3 years? That I knew them and regarded them as sort of ancestors or heroes or elders, and missed them, although not in the way you miss the people that, you know, really hold you up in sand, the people you have that day after day intimacy with. What am I saying? I remember once an old eminent critic told me that I would never really be serious as a dance critic unless I knew mime, was literal, was fluent in mime, ballet mime. I remember another older eminent critic telling me, yes, they were both old white men, they were chief critics, telling me that I would have to find a way to get over to see the European festivals if I were going to be serious as a dance critic. And I suppose in a way they're both right. I mean, they're right for certain types of criticism, and I don't. But I think maybe what I find not even irksome, just limiting about these statements is that they present audible that there is only one way to be a crow, or one important type of crow. And I think what I love about these four men is that they were each crow in such different wind. Don't think that they expected anyone to be crow, although they believed absolutely in what they were doing. One of them didn't even publish, but was, to my mind, one of the finest poet critics I've known. So, it's the shortest day of the year. I'm collecting glass on the shore of Jones's Bay for my mother for muffled sound. There are little birds in all the trees. They look like juncos. They fly like juncos and have the coloring of juncos. My eyes are not as good as they used to be. So maybe somebody can tell me after the fact if that worked or didn't. Bill Berkson, Douglas Crimp, Kevin Killian, and Sam Miller were born within 13 years of each other, beginning with Bill in 1939, Douglas in 1944, and Sam and Kevin little more than a month apart in 1952. The four men died in a 3-year span, also beginning with Bill. I had seen him just the night before, June 15th, 2016, at the 500 Club in San Francisco. A buzzing crowd was celebrating the new catalog for a David Ireland show at the San Francisco Art Institute, co-curated by Constance Llewellyn, Bill's wife. I remember Connie twirling in the middle of the action. My last glimpse of Bill, he was sandwiched between Bob Gluck and Norma Cole, looking relaxed and debonair as always, grinning that marvelous grin. In fact, the last times, or for that matter, almost all of the times I saw Douglas, Kevin, and Sam, the occasions involved art. Not surprising. This was the ground of our friendships. More to the point, art was life's work for each of them. As I experienced these men, all of whom I knew only in the final years of their lives, art was life, in an everyday sort of way, no less special for being matter of fact. In the last email I received from Kevin, a group message sent to those of us who had performed his play, Box of Rain, which Max Crandall directed at the Stud, he wrote, "What an extravaganza, a golden bowl, the beginning and end of civilization." The beginning and end. Kevin would be gone in a little more than 2 weeks on June 15th, 2019. The proximity to the anniversary of Bill's death like some hideous joke, a bookend of loss in San Francisco. Bill, along with Connie, and Kevin, along with Dodie Bellamy, hold for me the enchantment of larger-than-life literary and artistic traditions. Bill with his starry trajectory from New York School poets and painters to the romance of a Bolinas scene in which he and Joanne Kiger were neighbors. And Kevin, a pivotal figure in the new narrative movement and San Francisco Poets Theater, keeper of Bay Area histories and mythologies flowing from the Berkeley Renaissance. Poets among artists, Kevin and Bill were in all the right rooms. Douglas and Sam, meanwhile, are inextricably bound up in my New York, where I spent the first 15 years of the millennium embedded in the downtown dance world. How many times did I sit in darkened theaters with one or both of them? How many pre- and after-show hangs planned at happenstance? Years of casual encounters as a young, know-it-all writer before I began to understand the extent to which each laid the foundations for how I receive and understand dance and visual art. So much of it comes from movements and systems these men helped to shape or wrote about or both. To quote Dodie and Kevin in their introduction to Writers Who Love Too Much, New Narrative, 1977-1997, in time we were to see that indeed these people's lives were more interesting than ours, but self-preservation wisely hides this disparity from the young in the name of self-esteem, end quote. When I think of Douglas and Sam, I think of Dance Space Project at St. Mark's Church, where I saw them so many times, where they were memorialized. Bill and Kevin were also honored at St. Mark's in celebrations hosted by the Poetry Project. But I attended their San Francisco memorials at the Art Institute and the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. Certain buildings form cities within cities. People who don't know each other, are not part of the same group or are adversaries even, are nonetheless united by these edifices, their ever accumulating densities through time. It's one of the things that's impoverishing and freeing about moving to a new place, particularly when you are no longer young. Your site-specific ghosts don't follow you. Douglas's memorial was the most recent. Everyone crowded into uneven rows of chairs, a temporary organism held within the sanctuary's beautiful, spare bones. He once told Dance Space director Judy Hussey Taylor that the theater was, quote, the closest place he had to a sacred space, end quote. My mind's eye conjures the severe geometries of Emily Coates dancing Yvonne Rainer, Morgan Basich's singing, coaxing the audience into song. All these people in all these rooms gathering to honor lives well lived, and public and private joined at last, however tenuously. And all the rooms one never enters, all the people one never lets in, the city that does not see beyond itself in its mythologies. I had the idea to read each of their last books, sparked by an offhand comment from Cedar Saigo about following the books where they take you. His faith in the breadcrumbs to get you through the forest stuck with me, forming a trail in and of itself. There's an aliveness in this fragmentary, unfinished nature of these final publications. Final for now. It seems impossible, for example, that Kevin's complete Amazon reviews and Douglas's Moroccan cookbook will not eventually see the light of day. They move fiercely, fitfully in the present. Bill's notebook on Frank O'Hara, published posthumously by Connie in facsimile form. The sometimes indecipherable flow of the handwriting in keeping with the immediacy of thought. A small volume of Kevin's weekly exchanges with Dodie offered at his memorial. A joint interrupted diary shimmering with the possibility of artifice. Quote, being writers, we faked the conversation, end quote. Dodie writes during the first exchange, Origins, referring to an earlier collaboration of theirs. Douglas's not yet out collection of writings on dance and dance film sits in its pale blue folder on my desktop, some of the files still containing his notes, as if the author might return at any moment to make improvements. And then there's Sam's book, which exists only in my mind, a collage of various poems he sent to me, and a serial work composed as Dance Space Project's writer-in-residence during the 2016 platform A Body in Places, dedicated to Eiko Itaki's solo performances. Something about the partial arranged views offered through these windows feels right. The books are beautiful in their incompleteness. They are enough. Dictation, July 19th, 2020. The way they were in the world, or the way their writing is in the world. Sigh, have to pee. I'm looking at the olive tree outside, listening to the dull roar of the freeway. I keep not making this final recording because I don't know what the thing is that I want to say. I'm just worrying at the sentences and circling, banging of freedom. The cat is racing back and forth, galloping through the apartment. Breath, breath, I don't want to swear, banging. A way of moving through language and experience. Long pause. Some permission given, understood through reading them, even just an idea of reading them, more than any conversations, banging. Of course, the dumb cliche, it's only when you can't ask anymore that you're astonished by all the things you never asked. The cat is using the litter box, and the wind chimes are going, and a dog is barking. Nota bene, there is no evidence of any of this in the recording. And everything outside is still and moving, and this recording doesn't have any magic in it. Maybe that's the right way. Stuffy inhale. I keep thinking of something M said about a pamphlet being what you can write now, but isn't that what every piece of writing is? You can only do what you can do now. Cat scratching in litter box. Pathos. Somebody's using a power saw. Nota bene, silence. Good for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia. I love that pamphlet quartet so much, and hearing you read from it is a real gift. Thank you so much. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce John Yau. John Yau is a poet, fiction writer, critic, editor, curator, and publisher. He has published over 40 books, recently Bijou in the Dark, The Wild Children of William Blake, and Foreign Sounds or Sounds Foreign. So I'll ask you now to applaud so loudly that even though you're all muted, John will hear it in New York.
Okay. Hello. All right. I'm amazed by that piece that Claudia wrote. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I feel like I should be the warm-up act. Anyway, I'll read a few poems. This is from a book that's gonna come out from Dawn called Genghis Khan on Drums. It'll come out in the fall of 2021. I not only forget what day it is, I forget what year we're in. And this is from the book has a lot of series of poems or clusters. Is that a good word to use now? And this is from a series called Opinion Sonnets, and it's number 18. Definitions for Joseph Donahue and Albert Mobilio. A senator is a larval form known to sprawl in leather chairs. A wet market is where you go to buy a bucket of unwashed food. A laboratory is what you need to coil together more diseases. A car is the rickshaw you drive when you cannot leave town. A hair salon is a mirror where you breed more germs. A restaurant is a table that lets you sneeze into the food. A president is an elected official who cannot tell the truth to his children. A secretary of state is a secretary of state is a poncho in charge of manufacturing rumors. A housing complex is where you go to die among friends. A sweatshop is one way to help shoppers save money. A whistleblower goes to jail for crimes others commit. A scientist is a shaved baboon who fits neatly into a lab coat. A buffoon is a person who believes the president first. A patriot is often identified by his or her misspelled tattoos. Opinion Sonnet 21. I watched the old man, who's not that old, fall harder than he was pushed. The police walked by because they had seen this act before, many times. They teach it in Chinese circus and acrobat school, an easy trick to get an ah. I watched the old man, a well-known agitator, a member of a terrorist group. He was carrying something in his hand, a device, probably made in China. Maybe the device sent the wrong signal, causing him to fall backward. That's because Chinese don't read from left to right, but get this, from right to left. I watched the old man fall, but was the blood coming from his head really his? All you need is a bag you can squeeze, and everyone will think you're dying. I watched the old man, who's not that old, act like he had been pushed after running into the police, tripping over his big feet and falling backward. One moment he was standing, the next moment he was on the ground bleeding. You don't get that way by being pushed. You get that way by falling. I watched the old man, who's not so old, fall before he was almost pushed. This is Opinion Sonnet 26. This is based on a game that I read that people in England played. You'll get what the game is pretty quickly. Opinion Sonnet 26. We want to be rambunctious and harass anyone who is slow. One way is to play tag with old people and shout at them. They're easy to pick out and they aren't going anywhere. You just need one. And the really round ones make good posts. They're fat and slow because they eat fatteners and don't exercise. Imagine one of them trying to run. It might almost make you cry when standing outside and laughing with friends is more amusing. Only old people and those with weak immune systems die from it. What's wrong with a little horseplay? We're just having some fun. It's always in the back of my mind that the world is freaking out. It's not like they have anything better to do in the summer sun. You can't start sobbing because gray wrinkled people croak from it. It makes a great plot for a revenge film that all the young dream of. It's another good reason to gather outside, drink beer, and sneer. This is something the president said on December 23rd, 2019. It uses only the words from something you said. The president's first lesson on air. It's true. I know bird graveyards better than anybody. I've studied killing bald eagles better than anybody living in our universe, in Germany, or under a windmill. If you own a house based on wind, I know you manufacture a tremendous amount of fumes, spewing noisy carbon into the atmosphere. I know. I've studied killing better than anybody. Whether it's in China or your house and the television goes off, I know dead birds are spewing cancer from the graveyards of our tiny world into our air, our wind, our everything. Congratulations, they say. Congratulations on your tiny world full of windmills and air. After I turned 69, I don't imagine that a chariot is hurrying near, but that a sleek car is speeding up. I started a list of the costumes I want to be buried in, beginning with horny centaur. I try to put aside obituaries, but I'm unable to do so for very long, maybe 10 minutes. I eat the same meal night after night while reading recipes of dishes I've never tasted. I shudder nearly every time I read the phrase lifetime guarantee or your money back. I no longer find it necessary to stop and look at what's going on at a construction site. I decide I won't tell people to stop sending me books, even if I'll never read them. I stop and watch ambulances trying to get past cars that don't want to move aside. I begin thinking about different methods I might use to remove myself from the story. I know what my friend meant when he said his dog would take his place on the couch. I think about the cities I'll never return to, including Caracas and Caracas. I wonder when I'll no longer begin a poem with the words if and when. I dream that my ashes will be scattered in a remote spot in Ireland that no one visits. I admit that shrinking into myself is not as unpleasant as I once thought. A view of the tropics covered in ash. I began lying to myself at regular intervals, stopping by the side of the road only when it was necessary. The vegetation did not improve, even as the interludes of pleasant shrubbery and herbaceous plants changed, and the waterfalls eventually became walls smothered in stains. I got tired of following myself back to the place where I was delivered, a howling newborn already indoctrinated that the mandibles of doom awaited me, along with other taunts and temptations too monstrous to mention. I did not have to sit long. We must all make dung, announced the boy with the smile full of crooked teeth. This was in the lobby where the first assignments were handed out. Where did you get those pearly gravestones? Screamed his toothless sister. What do you mean? What do you mean? Moaned another vehicle headed for Bedlam in an elastic waistband. Life in an upscale suburb isn't bad once you get used to hell. The suburban pageantry of soccer played with plastic skulls and rapacious bugs on a green summer day is worthy of an opera, complete with pouting male and curvaceous diva. Drugstores that deliver licensed drugs and pastel condiments are not to be sneezed at. There are plenty of tonics guaranteed to cure baldness, but impotency is something to be proud of since it means your contributions to civilization's convulsions are dwindling at an accelerated rate. This is the time to begin concentrating on flying carpets, inexpensive episodes, and sitting in a rowboat on a speckled lake, dreaming of that moment long ago when the first lie came to you unbidden. You're sleeping under a tree that reaches up past the bottom layer of starlit clouds. The lower branches are burning, just as you planned. This poem is, I am imagining, is written on a bathroom wall of a bar called the Apocalypse Lounge. Abecedarian with stutter, written on bathroom wall of the Apocalypse Lounge. Another alphabet soup brimming with poisoned hieroglyphs. Battle decay settles its wet fingers on your cold shoulder. Coming soon, lie detectors for palm readers. Delighted by ravings written in cubbyholes of bedlam, edited lines in moldy treatises, forged journals, and plagiarized biographies, found gasping in field of overturned monuments and dead squirrels, greater disappointments await you until further notice. How enchanting your shiny shackles can be at a time like this. I'll match your abstinence and raise you one tiny guffaw. Join together and plead for a snowball's chance at being granted temporary status. Kafka dreamed he was chained to a tricycle tied to a burning tree. Luckily, mortification is the least of your afflictions. My protuberances have enthralled clowns of every stripe and polka dot. Noxious Nebraska welcomes all nomads crawling across the unmarked plains. Over my dead loaf, and don't you forget it, ever. Patron head bashing is no longer considered necessary for admission. Queen's spending spree and Mr. Smarty Pants have started their descent. Refresh the parts of yourself that manage to remain intact. Start over, an alphabet soup full of brittle lice, scurrilous sleeves with a twist of bristling lemon. Saw and the Abyssinians singing in a tree, Pissing. The young policeman begins barking relentlessly at approaching strangers. Under the weather, volcano, boardwalk, and skin, verisimilitude and a shadow wink back at you. What lowly sow licked your face, Mr. Prune Apple? Xenomorphic wildlife in easily disposable jars all yours for only a fraction of a lifetime. Yearning for a cheeseburger and fries when a can of worms will have to do. Zephyrs have started nudging this upland toward the lightning storm. Um, read a few more, just one more. Uh, uh, oh, I'll read this one. This will be the last poem I read. It's called My Multitudes. I guess it's my response to Walt Whitman, except written from the point of someone who has a multiple personality disorder. My multitudes. That blackened winter we came down from the mountains, a ragtag end of the year collection of shepherds or wanderers that city tried hard to herd into holding pens. My older sister escaped and fled to the forest, which was still burning and safe, while my younger brother, or bother, grabbed a spoon and started digging his way to China. I grew up in shambles, my pockets crammed with expired ration coupons. I was a safety hazard, a name spoken only in the dark. I learned to wear shame and call it the color of my skin. Saturday afternoon time wasters formed the basic staples of my ill conceived diet. Famished youth, I fed myself on a rerun cycle of axe grinders, prison rats, corrupt corruptors, blackmailers, ruffians, embittered siblings, lone wolves, and every variety kept on the shelf of angry packs, delivered like candy to be gobbled because it released the burning sweetness as it went down. At school, I pretended to watch time drop its noose into a simmering ocean until the screen flashed another enticing signal. Today, as a multiple personality adult in need of more therapy, I try to keep track of babbling chestnuts and overflowing toilets to clap discreetly at the luminous pageantry of flashing lights, ambulances, and police cars, especially. Don't any blips puddle up your screen, I hear you ask rudely? Are you wondering where our furry little scapegoat went and how we might go about getting another? I answer. How's this boatload of stripe different from the last delivery, which you're still sorting through? Whimper the cowed crowds filling my head. Today, amidst the crashing voices, my forlorn corpulent self stumbles down darkened lanes, while my other bumpkins and bobbins grow more rowdy beneath the pagoda trees of the infested capital, where the president is content to disguise himself. The mirror listens to his abbreviated confession. He believes he's been miscast as a petty bickerer rather than as a cheerful baker. Never one to glow in the dark, he relishes splendor only when it comes to him in designer packages. He's a self made dam, an impregnable wall. Perhaps this is why you've come to me. Perhaps you're a restless nocturnal spirit looking for an outlet, even as the planes soar overhead, their bomb bay doors flapping. What multiple what multiplication system of bleeding have you refused, knowing better offers are a manufactured dream, a byproduct of our continuous distractions? Or perhaps you're another troubled twister who wants to make good. Is that why the words in me are beginning to break ground? Perhaps they're looking for a place to take root, shake off the dust surrounding them. Cold afternoon. Transient enterprises cancel each other out in this world of shopkeepers and weakened hospitality. The wind settles into the trees, plump birds waiting to be plucked for their monetary value. It's nearly tomorrow. Have you set your alarm as you know you should? Have you considered how many other unheard singers are standing beside you in this corner of the incinerator? Thank you. Thanks. I guess we go back on now and talk, Claudia.
Woo! I'm gonna offer my version of applause. John, that was amazing. Hell yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
How wonderful.
that's so great to hear.
Thank you.
I, you know, I have so many thoughts running through my head. I was just thinking about the salon you ran for. Are you, maybe you're still running it? I don't know, but just.
No, I'm not. I wish I was. We'd have to run it over Zoom, I guess.
Yeah,
Do something with a young poet named Genji Amino through the Poetry Project. So we'll meet on Zoom once a month.
oh, I saw that. You're one of the mentors, right?
I'm a mentor. Yes, unbelievable. So I'm a D-mentor, I guess, or something.
Well, I mean, yeah, for me, you were early on, I think, really saved me from very impoverished ideas of what poetry and criticism are. You really opened up what they could be. So, but yeah, I think a lot of that is sort of decomposing.
Yeah. So if anyone has questions for Claudia or I, please use the chat box, right? Or the chat thing. Or send them to Brandon. Send
Yes,
smoke signals. Though I guess I shouldn't say send smoke signals in California.
I have a question while people are typing.
Okay.
I always think of you as such a good finder of language and happy accidents or unhappy accidents.
Right.
I wonder, yeah, have you had to shift your strategies with shelter in place, or where are you finding your language these days?
No, I'm still writing the same way. I mean, a little bit differently. Um, we use a lot of books. I have hundreds of books in the house, so I kind of go through them, use words I haven't used or things like that. Movies, bad movies especially, which I only watch for about 10 minutes and then I'm bored and suddenly I'm back writing, things like that. Also, I don't know if this is true for you, but in New York, you don't really want to go out that much, except if you really want to do something or go to a gallery. I have not been in a supermarket since March,
Wow, yeah.
and I certainly have not been in a restaurant, even I've eaten out once since March. So there's a lot of time then I am teaching two classes on Zoom. They're both lecture. It's the same class, but it's a lecture class. So I spend a lot of time preparing the lecture, and it just gets more and more elaborate. And finally, I don't think my students know what I'm talking about because I'm just like having fun working it out. So, and now they go on longer than they're supposed to. I guess you're not, supposed to last 50 minutes, and the last time I spoke for an hour and 20 minutes. They didn't seem to complain. And I was going on and on about some artists, and I was thinking, I'm glad I can't see if they've fallen asleep at their computer,
Yeah. Really takes away a lot of the performance anxiety and introduces new elements.
Exactly. So
we've got a couple questions from the audience. May I interrupt?
yeah.
One question we have is, how much, I think this is for both of you, how much do you think poetry and criticism can overlap?
Completely.
Yeah, pretty completely. I've written poems based on artists. I turned Piero de Cosimo into a young woman, so I can also do other things that you can't really do in a review. So, and I made up paintings that Piero de Cosimo painted based on paintings he did paint. So, how come complaint gets a bad rap? I hear your poems and think you're recuperating a classic mood or mode of complaint. I don't know why complaint gets a bad rap. I think we should complain more. I don't think we complain enough. What?
I would say that I think once you get outside of the very narrow realm of newspaper reviews, criticism can do whatever it wants. And not to, I mean, there are people working at I mean, fewer and fewer, but there are people working at newspapers who are doing great work, but often that's a very, very narrow understanding of what criticism can do.
Yeah, they tell you what the artist is wearing and where they eat and how nice their house is. I mean, this stuff seems to have very little to do with art, you know. And they usually only find artists that are financially successful, as if somehow that's a measure, which, as I tell my students, means that Sylvester Stallone was probably one of the greatest actors of all time, if you're going to use monetary value as a kind of standard of measure. So, of course, half my students probably don't know who Sylvester Stallone is, but that's even better, right? Oh dear. I don't know why. I like complaining in poems, actually. I think in the class, I often got you guys to complain. And I remember giving an assignment where you were supposed to complain, but the reader was not supposed to know what you were complaining about. Because I said, once you know what they're complaining about, kind of everyone gets bored. So could you just have a long complaint, but never get around to what you're complaining about, or complain about 100 things? So
that for anybody who might still be watching, John used to run this salon. It was a workshop, but it was also a salon, and he invited me to participate in it shortly after I got to New York. And yeah, it was a bunch of us sitting around a table, and as I recall, there were a lot of airing of grievances.
We have another question. This is directed for John, but I think, Claudia, if you have a perspective on this, I would love to hear it as well. But John, the question is, if you feel like it, can you talk about your history through the decades with sonnets? Whose, how, why? As a reader, as a maker of them yourself, your ways of hearing them, working with them, revisiting them.
well, I guess, as a young poet, the first sonnets that I read that were really, quote, modern were Ted Berrigan sonnets. And, and in a way, you immediately want to copy them, copy the method of them. And I immediately knew that once I wanted to copy the method of them, I had to find another way to write. Because if you really love someone's work, you shouldn't write like them. You should find another way. So that sort of made the sonnet modern for me. And also, I just think as a 14-line form, maybe I only have enough thoughts to fill 14 lines and then I'm bored with myself or something. I don't know. It's just a form that I've obsessed over again and again. And that's the best I can say about it. And also, I mean, I took English literature classes, so I had to read thousands of sonnets, or at least hundreds as a student at Bard College. So that was one side of my education, and the other side was a kind of was Robert Kelly. So there are two sides to my education at Bard. One was very formal, and they taught poets whose names I won't even mention. And then there was Robert Kelly turning us on to all sorts of people. And that sort of opened me up to bringing one side and meeting the other side, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Thank you. We've got another question, excuse me, not another sonnet. So John, this question is for you as well. So when you say you are still writing the same way, how do you mean? How do you go about getting the language that comprises the opinion sonnets into their form? And what was the method of composition?
Okay, so originally the opinion sonnets started when I started following threads on the computer having to do with anything being Chinese. And it started with this event that happened, I don't know, 5 years ago, where supposedly a man in China and his girlfriend were shopping in a shopping mall in Hong Kong, and his girlfriend refused to stop shopping and he committed suicide. And then this whole thread started on the internet kind of making fun of this event and sort of a lot of racist comments about what Chinese people are like and on and on and on. And I decided to use that language and see if I could do something with it. So a lot, so so there's 28 of them, and it started like that. One of the poems I read is about the man in, I think, Buffalo, who's pushed over by the police and they walk by. So, and others come from just statements I read online about Asians, and I kind of try and see if I can inhabit the person who said those words and see where I can take them. So that's a lot of what happens. So that's where I get my language. But then there's other sonnets that I use in the series, like I rewrote a sonnet by Spencer. I used only his N words and decided what I could make go before it. So I do things like that. So any different, any method that'll work in writing.
Thank you. I have a question I'd like to share for both of you, and maybe Claudia, I'll ask you to respond first. But I was sort of thinking that, you know, we joke in my house about the fact that poets may suffer a little less than others in this time, because poets like to do things like sit around by themselves and read all day, you know. But I know that for the two of you, that you know, visual art and performance are hugely motivating for your writing and your thinking. So of course, since so much of that is I mean, we can still experience it in some way, but so much of it is inaccessible. I want to know how you've been keeping up, how you've thought maybe about how your critical work has changed. I mean, since we're having a conversation too about how some of the poetry methods have not.
Yeah. It's funny that, yeah, it made me think of a anecdote about poets suffering, but maybe I'll skip that. We all have those anecdotes. You know, I'm very lucky in that I live with one of my favorite musicians. We started the evening with a duet of Philip Greenleaf and Scott Amendola, and so I get to hear Philip practicing a lot, which is lovely. But yeah, I think at first I was actually in Australia when I was doing some teaching and performing around dance there, and so I'd been out of the country for a few weeks when Shelter in Place started. I was telling the very bad joke that the last time I left my house, I was in Australia for a while, which wasn't actually a joke, but I was on the road for a while, and so I think I was quite happy to be still and quiet and to be reading a lot, and very, you know, incredibly lucky to be able to do all of those things. And I found that my reading habits have changed dramatically. I'm not reading nearly as much criticism. You know, I'm reading the stuff that I'm editing, of course, for Open Space, but yeah, there's been definitely an inward turn. I think the thing that I really miss is the energy of the room of people together. When I mean, I was joking with somebody that you know, poetry readings over Zoom are much better for audiences and much worse for poets. You know, if you don't like it, you can just go in the other room as the audience member, but reading into a vacuum is hard. And yeah, the vacuum is hard.
Every time I go to a gallery now, there's no one there. And actually, if people walk in, I actually become incredibly uptight. So it's really weird because I feel like I'm living in my head way more. And I don't, and you know, I go to a gallery and I hope that the dealer doesn't get so anxious they come out and start talking to me, you know, and explaining the work. So but it's really this weird sense of isolation. Like last week, I went to a gallery uptown on between Park and Lexington, and they had closed the street off so the kids from this private school could play. And I was like some weird guy watching kids running back and forth up the street thinking, this is really nice to be able to do. So you feel like this really, I'm living in another world. That's really, I mean, it's this world, but it's like another world. And I went to this gallery, and the gallery used to be in Tribeca, but they had to relocate into this brownstone. I mean, it's like things are really different. And if I do go to a gallery, I try to go to the most two in a day. And before the pandemic, I'd go to as many as 8 or 9 in a day. But I don't want to be out that long anymore. You know, so there is a kind of consciousness about stuff that's very different. Um, I don't know that it makes you look differently, but it makes you not take it for granted that you're seeing two shows, you know. So I have to be careful how I pick them because chances are likely I'm going to review one of the shows I go to. And so I have to kind of do more research. I can't browse, as they say, I can't wander in and out. And I'm going to shows of artists that I haven't seen before in some cases. So I have to do as much research on them as I can before I get there. Whereas, like, you know, it's like shopping at Amazon. Going to a gallery now is like Amazon. You know what you want, so you go on Amazon. But you walk into a bookstore, it's like you browse. And before going to galleries was like one of the few browsing possibilities left in this world, and suddenly that's taken away, and you kind of, and then I feel like I can't see enough. You know what I mean? There's like, I feel like for every 3 shows I see or 5 shows I see, I know there's other shows I'm not seeing and they're not going to be up that long, and that depresses me, you know. Or that there's shows slightly out of the way that I can't get to, or I don't, you know, how am I going to, I mean, I often take a taxi. I don't take public transportation. So, okay, but how many taxis can you take in a day, right? I don't know if I were, I think Frank O'Hare and I would have gotten along about this because he supposedly took a lot of taxis. I'm quite happy taking taxis. So, because I mean, in a taxi, you only have one person to deal with. On a subway, who knows, right?
Definitely. Well, John, I have to tell you, I've been reading all your reviews a lot lately, and they have given me the feeling of being in those galleries. It's like a
Oh,
effect of the writing, and I'm sitting here in El Cerrito, fucking wishing I could go to a gallery and see a show.
right, right.
Um,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah.
And now museums are opening in New York, and I haven't gone yet, but I feel like I'm. Often I used to go to the Met or something just to see one painting or 2 paintings, or go to MoMA because I have a pass so I could walk in and see, or even the Whitney. And I haven't done that in months and months. And I used to, was one of my great pleasures was to go to the Met and see like 3 paintings and then go downstairs and eat French fries and just daydream about what I just looked at, you know. So
Yeah. Well, I hope that's a pleasure. I hope we can all daydream about recovery someday and get you back in the Met,
yeah, yeah.
back in our places. But with that, actually, I think we've run out of time. So I just want to again thank everyone for coming.
Oh, thank you.
John
Thank
and
you for
Claudia, of
having me. It's
course.
great meeting with you, Claudia.
Yeah, it was so nice.
I'm gonna get that book. I didn't know it was out.
It is.
I'll bug
Somewhere in
Matt.
the world.
Okay, Matt Fee, time to get that book to me.
Okay. Before we sign off, I just want to also put a plug in for October 29th. The Poetry Center will be celebrating Bob Kaufman after his 95th birthday. So again, October 29th, that's a virtual event, of course, but please look into that. And thank you all so much for coming, and have a lovely night from San Francisco to New York and beyond.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye. Take care of yourself. We'll be in touch sometime.
No, it's great. Are you off?
No, not yet.
Oh.